Welcome to the Expansive CEO podcast. I'm your host, Hannah Chapman, founder of Expansive CEO and X Squared Wealth Planning. Buckle in as we explore how to create true prosperity and build a business and a life that expands beyond yourself and makes a dent in the universe. Welcome, everyone, to this episode of the Expansive CEO podcast. It is actually our first podcast of 2025, so that's super exciting. I am here today with an amazing guest. I'm going to introduce her in just a second, but as a little bit of a backstory, I have been doing a lot of relationship work myself, with my husband, with my kids, with all of my relationships over the last several years, and have been working with my clients. In my financial planning practice, I work with a lot of couples. It's very natural for, people want to do financial planning together. And relationship work comes into play so often. If a couple is actually not willing to go into some of the relationship work that needs to be done, that actually hinders even the financial planning process and the investment management process and the different money stories that my clients come into a relationship with can really have a big impact on their household harmony, how they work together. And in my coaching practice, when we talk about human design and gene keys, one thing people always want to know is, okay, what about my partner or what about my child? How do I connect with them? What is that like? Right. So we have this innate desire and need to understand our relationships, to be able to function in relationships with other people, to be fundamentally interdependent. And so that for me is a huge, huge theme for this year. And this is actually, I'll share this now too. This particular podcast kind of kicks off a series that will be really relationship focused. So I'm really excited to start with you, Melissa, and to introduce you. Today I'm with Melissa Nanavati, who helps high performers, especially, build thriving, peaceful relationships while still pursuing epic goals. She's a speaker, an author, a relationship architect, and she combines personal experience with research into human connection to share super actionable insights and frameworks that people can actually use. And she speaks about how to create, again, peaceful is really standing out to me here, peaceful, fulfilling relationships without sacrificing their ambition. So, Melissa, you're talking straight to my audience of people who are expansive CEOs who want to create businesses that really harmonize with who they are as a person, with their families, with their communities, with the impact they want to make. So I'm so excited to talk to you and have you on the podcast and to hear more about your story.
Well, first of all, thank you so much for having me on the show. It's been really exciting to kind of dive into this and see what a theme it's become for so many people, especially coming into the new year. As people are reevaluating not only their business goals, but their relationship goals, whether you're in partnership or seeking partnership. And to answer your question a little bit more about my backstory and how I got here. So I actually graduated from college with honors when I was 18 years old. I entered the workforce super young, and I thought that having, a high level of career success and doing really well professionally would guarantee me kind of a better shot in the dating world. And what I found was that I really struggled in this area. For like a decade, I went on over 100 first dates before I met my now husband. I was moving through things like anxious attachment, people pleasing, alcohol abuse, which are a lot of themes that I've seen with a lot of high performers. We are so empathic oftentimes, and that's what's required to be a good leader. But then can that be too much in your personal life? So through a lot of self-study, therapy, reading every book I could get my hands on, I was able to not only break free of alcohol, but the anxiety, the anxious attachment, and ended up at a meditation retreat called 40 Years of Zen. And there they do neurofeedback. So you're hooked up to all these electrodes and you're in real time working on getting into brainwave states like alpha or gamma. And I went there specifically with the intention to move through anxious attachment. And on the last day, we were doing kind of visioning of what do we want out of our future? What does our future partnership or future in general look like? And I had a vision so real that it propelled me to break my lease, move several states away from my home of 12 years, and all with the intention that my future partner was there. And
Mm.
within 2 months of moving, I had met him. We got engaged in 2 months, married at 5.5 months, and have created a relationship that I didn't even know was possible. And from that, really, my mission became to help other people have the relationship that we have, that level of peace, all while chasing epic goals, as you mentioned earlier. And I think that we sometimes believe we have to sacrifice one for the other rather than it can fuel each other. And that is now really what I'm passionate about is helping high performers, like you said, figure out how do I apply these skills of courage, vulnerability, transparency, all of these kind of core virtues from my work life to my love life.
Oh my gosh. I think one of the reasons um like we resonate so much and why, my one of my dear friends connected us in the first place, like you have to meet, is that peace, right?
Mhm.
The feeling of peace, creating peaceful relationships. That's like literally on my websites too. Like, how do you create a peaceful relationship with money? How do you have inner peace around your relationship with money? And that stems into that goes, say I was going to say bleeds, but I don't like that word. It like makes it
Permeate.
permeates. Beautiful. Yes, it permeates all of your other relationships. And
Mhm.
so almost what I'm hearing and what that feels like is like we're coming to the same thing
Yes.
from these different, like, what's your entry point, right? Like the
Right.
entry point is like finances for me. The entry point is relationship for you, right? And so, but we're focused on this kernel of how do we create peaceful relationships? Because
Absolutely.
that's where what I think I'm hearing, and I know you're going to talk about more, is when we have this base of stability, of peace, that's where those epic goals and dreams, they have a safe launching pad, is what it feels like to me.
100%. And I think so much of that too is people can misunderstand that sometimes and say, oh, does that mean you brush things under the rug? And that's not the case. Creating peace isn't about ignoring your needs or ignoring your wants or brushing issues under the rug, so to speak, but it's really about having the courage and the framework to be able to address issues as a team, which I'm sure you do a lot in your financial planning and coaching for people as well. It's so much about it's not you versus your partner when issues come up,
Mm.
it's you and your partner versus the issue. And
Mm.
having that understanding and that framework allows you to navigate disagreements because disagreements are natural. You're two different humans, so you're going to have two different experiences coming together. And oftentimes we think that we have to agree with our partner on everything, but that's simply not the case. It's about creating shared language and a shared framework for addressing issues or disagreements before they can escalate into a fight.
Okay, so um give me like a for instance. I think that's what, like, when you're working, especially, so we're talking high performers, we're talking maybe some, I'll describe myself, right? Like type A, high
Yeah.
achiever, like recovering people pleaser and perfectionist, all of that, right? Where are you like starting with them? What's the process look like when you meet them? What are they going through? Like what are some of those issues?
I think oftentimes the issues are even things that are small scale, right? So small things have big impacts. One of the things that, for example, that my husband and I worked through early on was alone time and being able to ask for alone time. Because when you're carrying so much stress in your work life, right? When you come home, yes, there's that beautiful connected time with your partner, but you also need time to process. And so often what I'm finding actually with individuals is that they're afraid to ask for something so small as an alone time because they don't want to hurt their partner's feelings.
Mm.
So, how do you get your needs met in this example without hurting the other person? So, it's giving people a framework to say, all right, here's what I'm looking for, but it doesn't mean I don't want to spend time with you. This is just a need I have. How do we co-create a schedule that supports both of us? So I think the biggest thing that I see a lot of times with high performers is the scheduling mismatch. There's expectations by one partner of quality time or of date night or of these sort of things. And then the expectation of the other person or desire of that other person to also have some time to decompress. So it's finding alignment even in the day to day of how do we schedule enough time for, being intentional about having that quality time, having the time you need to recharge, to process, and to be with oneself. And so that's really where it even starts is the little things. How do you operationalize little acts of love? Right. So often we forget, okay, something as simple or cliche as buying your partner flowers. Maybe you have a calendar reminder to do that once a week or to do that once a month. So really figuring out what are the little acts of daily love and how do we create a schedule, especially as type A people, that matches both of our goals.
Mm. And do you typically work with uh, more with women or with men, or what does your practice look like? Who's usually the one reaching out, I think is the thing I'm trying to ask where I'm going.
Absolutely. And I think one of the things, it's been pretty balanced, which has been interesting to see. I initially got a lot more questions from women. And then as it's evolved, it's been men as well saying, okay, I'm really stressed, but I also see you're in this relationship where presently my husband is actually in Antarctica for 4 months, attempting to be the first person to ski across the continent, which has created a lot of stress. And people often think, okay, so he must not have time to make her feel loved. And when they hear that that's not the case, I've gotten more questions from men. All right, I'm busy and I'm stressed, but how do I still support my partner in these situations when work is taking up so much of my time? And so it's about operationalizing a lot of these things, just like you would in your work environment.
So, okay, so what are some of the ways that your husband is making you feel loved while he's in friggin' Antarctica for 4 months? I want to hear.
So one of the things that we did was prior to him leaving, we actually both sat down and recorded each other a video message for every week that we're apart. So every Friday, I know I get to watch a video from my husband with encouragement and words. And so that, along with the fact that he basically missed our wedding anniversary, Christmas, Valentine's Day. And so he pre-purchased gifts for each of the holidays. So I got to open them on the day. And again, it's not a huge lift, but it maybe took him a few hours of preparation. So it's so much about the planning, especially if you know you're going into, say, a busy season in work. How can I pre-plan surprises, gifts, and really start to understand my partner's love languages? So it's touching them in a space where they will feel the most loved.
I love that. I love that. That's so the thing that like hits for me, I'm so love language wise, I'm a quality time person
Yes.
for sure. Quality time and words of affirmation are my biggest love languages. And so knowing, that if my partner was gone for 4 months, I would be definitely wanting that quality time, right? I would be feel like I was missing that. But having those, words of affirmation on the side, something that was planned or something that was thoughtful, it feels like the intentionality behind it,
Exactly.
right? It's like bringing, like taking that thoughtfulness and putting it into action. And that's what is felt on the other side. Am I getting that right?
100%. And I think it's valuable for anyone listening, if you don't know your love languages, to take a quick inventory. I think the Big Five test is free and very quick to take, but those being quality time, gifts, acts of service, physical touch, words of affirmation. And similar to you, my top, I would say three are quality time, words of affirmation, as well as physical touch. And so, yes, there's certain one of these we can't do in this time, right? So you can't be physically next to your partner. But again, it's the intentionality and it's the pre-planning and him knowing that, for example, words of affirmation is number one for me. Those video messages just mean the world to me. And similarly, I know that acts of service is really big for him. So I helped him with all of his packing and preparation and being able to do those things even in advance of time apart or stressful seasons of life, I think is so profoundly helpful.
Mm. Yeah, you just touched on something super interesting. So over the last couple of years, really, I've been seeing interesting, I'll say pushback for sure, like about the love languages, right? And the five, the big five, um, especially in, I'll just like call it out exactly the way that I've heard other people say it, right? That okay, well, women are usually acts of service because they just want help. They just freaking want help around the house. They want help with the kids. They want help with different tasks, right? So acts of service. And men are always 100% physical touch. Like that's everyone's going to take the quiz, and men are going to be physical touch, and women are going to be acts of service or quality time. So it's, this like cynicism around
Mhm.
it and around the fact that it was, it's a Christian based book and series, so it's not necessarily um,
Not
geared
new.
towards, yeah, it's not
Yeah.
neutral in that
Yeah.
sense, right? Like any like, what's so interesting is that on one hand, I agree with some of that, right? Like there's absolutely merit to that, and to the fact that there are probably a lot more than five love languages, right? That
Absolutely.
these are not the only ways that people give or receive love. My pushback against that pushback, though, is that it gives us a very basic framework that we can start to learn to relate to one another. Even if you like got rid of everything else about the system
Hmm.
and just took, okay, what are the main ways that you feel seen and loved in your relationship? If you've got, okay, there's, physical touch, acts of service, quality time, words of affirmation, and giving gifts. Okay. Well, what about, like doing new things together, right?
Exactly.
All right. Well, maybe that's your number six, right? Like that we can expand this in other ways, but the basic framework of it does speak to some, I want to say, like kind of a base truth that we as individuals do tend to feel seen, loved, cherished, thought of in kind of these like different ways. How do you feel about it?
I really agree with your take on this as well. And I always say anything like this, including different types of personality testing, it gives you a basis. It gives you a starting framework and shared language to be able to have deeper discussions about it. So I don't think it's the end all be all. To your point, new experiences is one of the kind of core things that my husband and I really share. And that's what we love. And that's how we feel loved as well. But again, I think it gives people who maybe haven't spent the time thinking about it. I think the opening for awareness is the most important part. Being aware that the way your partner gives or receives love may be different than yours is really all I'm hoping for people to get from that test and to get some basic understanding of how to ask for the things that they are desiring and
Mm,
feel shame around it as well, saying, okay, if I need more hugs or if I need more snuggles, right, that isn't that unacceptable. And it
hmm
just gives them language to say, this sort of connection makes me feel really grounded. It makes me feel secure. It makes me feel loved. So that's actually even something in I have like a free guide about the five relationship killers for high performers. And part of it takes them through an exercise where they identify how do I feel supported? So even a step kind of zoomed out of beyond loved is how do I feel supported? And what sort of characteristics do I exhibit when I'm under stress? So my partner not being asked to be a mind reader, but can start to know the signs of, okay, they might need me to pour into them a little bit more right now. And again, while it's always up to us to communicate what we need, when you're really under stress, it might be a little difficult to communicate what you need, and you might start to show it through your actions first before you even have the awareness that you need a little bit more support.
Ooh, that's such a good point. And um, I had a conversation with clients recently where that particular thing came up. Feeling super stressed, not feeling like, one partner was doing all the different things to prep for a bunch of holiday stuff and then getting the kids ready and getting everyone together and was just feeling like cup empty.
Yeah.
And there was on the, with the other partner when she said, "Hey, I'm not feeling great. Just so you know, like where I'm at right now, like I'm feeling really depleted. And every time the kids are like asking for more, I'm it's like the cup is crumbling."
Mm.
And the partner didn't, he didn't know what to do with it. It's like, okay, I don't know what to do with that right now. And so that aspect that I'm um feeling, or that's coming up around that, is yeah, that feeling of we don't want to be mind readers. I don't want to be a mind reader. And even my husband and I have been together for 23 years. It'll be 24 this later this year. We, you know,
Oh,
24.
congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah, it's been a long, we've had many relationships in that
Yeah, I can
in that
imagine.
course of time. Is the way I like to say it. But even from the very beginning, I was aware that I didn't want to expect him to be a mind reader. And what do I do with that? What does that mean? One, like the couple I mentioned, like being able to communicate, hey, I'm feeling overwhelmed right now, or this is happening, whatever is happening. Okay, being able to say it out loud, communicate it. Um, but I will also say that it feels amazing for for my husband to see when things are a little bit crazy, and to like come up and support me
Yeah.
without having to be asked. And so while it's not an expectation, if we can see each other that way, and we can like come up and support without being asked, it really like, there's not very many other things that I can think of in a relationship that feel as comforting, truly supported, right? That's like the magic in a relationship. And so going back to the client example, that was one of the things that I was kind of sharing, was like, yeah, is that what you would like to feel? Is that like, oh, I see. Yeah, I see how much you already did to prepare. I see that the kids are going a little crazy. The next time they ask for you, I'm going to step in, and just not even, we're just going to redirect immediately, so that you can like be calm for a little bit. Right. And then that's what feels, oh, okay, they see me.
I could not agree more. And I think that's where there's so much value in doing what I like to call the pre-work. Having those conversations, having the understanding of what are some of those indicators before you're in such a place of stress. Like your client said, maybe she even said, I don't know what to ask for. And in that moment, he didn't know because they hadn't previously discussed
Mm.
in times of high stress, what are the things you need? And I think having those kind of pre-work conversations early on and saying, okay, when I'm in seasons of stress, here are some of my own indicators. And here are the things, like here's a little list basically that would make me feel loved or supported. Just like you said, I'll handle when the kids ask for something. I'll take out trash today. I'll have dinner ready on the table so you don't even need to think about cooking. And knowing what those little things are in advance gives your partner an opportunity not to, again, mind read or be perfect, but to just start to notice those moments and have a framework for what they need to do.
Mm. There's like a kindness to
Mm,
that.
yes.
It feels like it's not, especially with the like not asking you to read my mind part, right? Because that's where, um, again, if we go with like societal tropes, right, that men feel like I'm just supposed to read her mind and know what she needs. And women on the other side are saying, no, that's not true. It's not, I'm
Yeah.
not asking you to read my mind, but it sure would be nice if you could see the things that need to be done and do some of them. See some of the things that I see when I see like things are not picked up, or when I see the trash is almost full, or when I see the dog water is almost empty, right? I'm registering all of those things immediately. Like that needs to be done, that needs to be done, that needs to be done, right? If someone else were to be like, oh, I see that too, and I take care of it,
Mhm.
that feels, again, that feels supportive, that feels like teamwork. But to be able to communicate that, hey, I really notice when the dog water is empty. Like I notice it immediately and like take care of it right away, right? Or I notice when XYZ, right? Like I just see all of these things. What do you notice? What do you see? what are the things that you're paying attention to so we can start to like understand each other better? Is that what you're doing
Exactly.
as well?
Exactly. And I think the important part is, yes, it's great when your partner notices, but it's always on us to at least say, I'm stressed, and communicate that. And then that can set off a thought, even if your partner, for example, doesn't notice that the dog water is running low. It's actually a running joke with my husband and I that he does not notice when things are not put away. He can walk right past a mess and not see it. And that's not right, wrong, good, bad. It's just different. And so what I see is different. And for me to expect him to notice something he doesn't naturally notice would be unreasonable. But what is reasonable is for me to say, hey, I'm feeling stressed today. Could you pick up X, Y, and Z? And he does it right away. And so building the muscle of acknowledging when you need help, even if you don't know exactly what that help is, at least gives your partner an opportunity for something to bounce off of. So it's not this unrealistic expectation that they should always notice when you're stressed, but just offering that and then already having discussed, here are the things that help me feel supported, that should then trigger something in them of here's how I can best support my partner.
Yes. Yeah. I really, really appreciate that. And what, I know when I was, especially when I was building X squared. So my financial planning firm,
Mhm.
it's, gosh, it'll be my 4-year anniversary soon of starting X squared. So very exciting. In January, later in January in 2025, it'll be the start of year 5. And some of the things that I would, as I was really like diving in and pushing forward, it was certainly I don't like to use the word grind, but at the beginning of the business, right there, it was a lot. I was doing a lot, and I still do a lot, but of mostly almost completely things that I really love and want to do. So that's been the shift over the last 4 years. But especially in those first couple of years, I was feeling really like, even in a very, what I would call a very egalitarian relationship for the most part that my husband and I have, there was still, expectations that I felt on me that were just too much as far as, cleaning and laundry, especially. My God, laundry. I could talk about laundry forever. Like I need more help. I need more help. And I'm not asking, I'm not asking my husband to do all the cleaning or do all the laundry. That's not what I was at. I was, specifically asking for more help, outside help. Like, let's bring someone in. Let's bring in a housekeeper. We can pay for that. We can pay someone else to do these things, right? When we both notice when, the baseboards aren't clean or when it's not, the house isn't getting vacuumed as often, right? Like all of those things that um kind of like the visual clutter, right? That
Yeah.
can make you tired for those of us, if you and I are the ones who notice all the visual clutter. My husband does too, but he's a very fairly tidy person himself as well. But like having like what I want to say is having someone else come in and clean and like stepping into a home that is just clean felt magical. It still does, but like especially at first, I was like, oh my gosh, like my brain can just relax because, everything just is tidy and clean and where it's supposed to be. And now I can relax and we can talk about that together. But there was quite a bit of conversation around that. Like, because it's sometimes it's a step, right? To, okay, we have to pay someone to do something that we have been doing ourselves for a
Mhm.
long time. And there's, certain like, oh, should we be spending money that way? All those questions that come up. Um, for me, I was the one advocating for yes, like I will spend $300 a month that way. But that having those discussions, like what's important to you, what do you see um in the house, what would make our lives feel better? My husband said at the same time, when it's done, like yeah, you're right, it does. It just feels good. It feels good in the house for things to be clean and just walk into any room and be like, oh my God, it just looks good.
I couldn't agree more. And I think that there's something to be said too for you even sharing that that was something that would make you feel more supported, that that was a need that you had. Because I think where resentment occurs is when we just continue ignoring the issue. I think it was the Gottman Institute said 69% of conflict and fights are over the same issues that go
Wow.
unresolved, which even in my experience of talking to clients, of talking to friends, is so true. These are the repeated issues. And so what you did, which I love, was a pattern interrupt. So you broke the pattern of that feeling of frustration, of that feeling of needing support by calling awareness to it. And then you jointly came to a decision that allowed you to move through it. And it might seem like something small to someone listening, but I think a lot of people also know that these roommate issues can easily become relationship issues when you're living day to day together because you're presented with the same stimuli every single day and you start to build up this feeling of irritation or frustration when you keep seeing the same issue in your home.
Yes, yeah, and I love that what you just connected that these um operational issues, we can put it that way, right? Like the
Operational issues,
operation,
beautiful.
yeah, of your household, if you're not on the same page and someone is someone feels like they can't say anything or the other person isn't seeing it right, like you were saying, okay, I see this more than he does, and that's okay. We just need to communicate about it. But if you don't feel like you have the ability to, for whatever reason, whether your ideas have been slapped down in the past or, if it's a wound from childhood that you can't speak up for yourself or you just have to deal with whatever is given to you, right? Whatever the underlying emotional block is, if you can't speak up for yourself for any reason, that fuels resentment, right? So that kernel of resentment just like grows and grows and grows until, really I feel like resentment is what poisons most relationships, right? It's those resentments that there can be many, and just that little seed of it when it's planted, you know, it taints everything.
It can grow very quickly. I had someone who I've been working with off and on for a while message me and say, I'm still frustrated. My fiance is, not putting away the dishes, essentially. And I said, okay, so what is the core though? What is the one thing, what's the one needle mover that your partner could do to really shift that for you to feel less frustrated at every little thing he does? And the answer was, we need to have more new experiences together. And the problem is when you have one area, just like you said, that kernel of resentment, it starts to taint your lens of your partner. And this one core thing, if you had just been able to ask and break through and at least bring some mutual awareness to this issue, could soften your experience of everything else. And that's also why I think having a playful approach to not only life, but your relationship is so important. Because if you can learn to laugh at these well, they're not little things. At these issues, to some degree, it softens the experience. It is literally a running joke that my husband does not remember to take his supplements unless I create a little trail of breadcrumbs for him that he has to trip over to do it. And again, it's not my job to always manage that, but given how much stress he was under, that was one of the things I took on. We recognized this as a season relationship. So it became a little bit of a joke. We would laugh about it, we'd be playful. And if you can just turn down the dial a little bit on some of these issues and approach it in that playful manner, it diffuses for both people.
That's so good. And I was cringing because I'm the one on the other side of that. My husband like brings a little pill container with vitamins. He's like, did you take these? And he knows it because it's like Tuesday and they're not like, no, not yet. Thank you. He's like, here
But
you
that's
go.
part of it, right? It's a give and take. It's never going to be 50-50. And I think that that's a really difficult and challenging expectation, especially for people, especially if you're both entrepreneurs, if you're high performers, if you're in that category. It's pretty much never going to be 50-50. And when you try and force that expectation, oh, my partner should do exactly half the work all the time, you create so much resentment. And so recognizing also where you're each skilled. It's similar to being in business. You wouldn't have your admin do all of your strategic planning. And so if I know that one of the things I'm particularly good at is helping to remember him to take the pills or the morning routine is really easy for me, I can help set him up for success. And so having that give and take of recognizing where are your strengths, where are your weaknesses, and also looking at life in seasons. That's something I talk about a lot because I think it's so valuable. For example, when you were starting your business, that was your season of strive. That was your season where you needed a whole lot more support. And it doesn't mean he couldn't be chasing after his own goals at the same time, but recognizing that maybe he needs to give 70 and you need to give 30. And having those intentional conversations and also giving your partner an understanding that there is an end point. The scale will tilt and shift as time goes on. So this past year, for example, I was definitely in my season of support for my husband leading up to his journey. I took on our financial planning. I took on house duties. I took on everything I could to support him. So it was probably more like 90-10 at different points. But I still felt loved and poured into because we also know that once he's back, that's going to shift. And so understanding the seasonality of it, you can also feel good about giving so much. And you also don't need to feel guilty if you're the one receiving so much.
Oh, that's so good. That's so good. It's um honoring the season that someone is in, right? And the other thing that it was coming to me as you were talking was giving each other credit,
Yes.
like
Yeah.
really giving credit for what each of us is good at. That was another um, piece for me and my husband when it, again, words of affirmation are very important to me. I feel I really like feel loved. And over the last couple of years, my husband has really recognized and said to me that my ability to hold the space for big emotions, especially for our kids, for him, for others, like that's one of the things that he admires about me. Right. And so knowing that that is such a critical piece of, our family, of, that it's keeping us together, helping our children grow in emotionally intelligent ways and connect with their emotions. Um, that felt really special for that to be acknowledged, to be given credit for that. Where, all right, so, doing laundry is a hard one for me. And I take it and have someone else do it because that's what I need. Uh, but that took a while to get there. But right, so it's like, yeah, I'm not doing the laundry every week. I'm not. It's not what I'm going to do. I'm not going to spend my time there. But this is where, and not but because, partly because this is where my skills and talents and love are actually needed more. The laundry is doesn't matter, right? Having clean clothes to wear matters, but how it gets done doesn't really matter. And so receiving credit for that. Um, and all the way, same for my kids, you know, giving them credit, getting, catching them doing the right thing, that kind of like,
That
yes.
acknowledgement,
Mm-hmm.
so
Yeah.
important. And that is one of the things I think most people, when they're feeling undervalued, is they're simply not, as you said, getting the credit or getting the acknowledgement for their efforts that day. Even one of the practices that my husband and I do, and I encourage a lot of other couples to do, is at the end of the day, see if you can make a quick mental list of all the things that your partner did for you that day and acknowledge them for it.
Mm.
That simple practice of gratitude, we don't even acknowledge ourselves enough, let alone hearing that from our partner. And having that gratitude practice, which it sounds like to me what your husband did for you as well, which is amazing. And that gratitude practice makes someone feel so felt, seen, appreciated. Even if words of affirmation is not your core way that you like to feel loved, acknowledgement universally, I have found, feels good when someone has made a big effort, especially with their primary partner.
Yeah. And what do you feel about, um, here's an interesting thing with acknowledgement. Uh, I remember times where I felt resentful of being acknowledged for things that I was upset that I was doing. Like
Hmm.
if it was the laundry or if it was, um, you know, extra cleaning or different things like that. Like those things are not my core. Like this doesn't feel like it's part of who I am. This feels like something I just have to do. Um, right. And we have a clean house. I went this
We do too. I
Right.
understand. We
Right.
also have a cleaner.
Right. Yes, exactly. We always, our house has always been tidy. But yeah, being acknowledged for those things that I felt a little bit resentful of actually didn't feel good. But it instead, it feels really good to be acknowledged for the things that are like parts of me
Mhm.
rather than something I'm doing. Does that make sense?
100%. And I think the information that that feeling of resentment presents, before we jumped on the call, I'd mentioned I really believe that the trigger is the gift. So when we have these moments of, ooh, that didn't feel good, can we share that with our partner and say, I appreciate you acknowledging me, but this isn't something I want to do on a regular basis. And that invites the conversation and the opportunity to shift so that maybe you do hire help for that thing that you feel a little bit resentful around doing. So, to your point, I think it's important to note when the acknowledgement doesn't feel good and speak up and share it. And it's
Mhm.
that continual feedback loop of sharing when you're being acknowledged for things that feels great, when it doesn't feel so good. And it's going to vary from person to person so much that there's no blanket rule of, yes, just acknowledge actions or just acknowledge emotional qualities about a person. For example, like the ability to hold space. And so I think that there's a learning of your partner of what do they like to be acknowledged for, but that learning can only occur if we're sharing when things are bothering us. And that's where courage really comes in. And I often say that play, curiosity, presence, and courage are really the four core virtues that will carry you through not only a relationship, but life in a way that is more peaceful. And so if we're not practicing that element of courage, of sharing, then we can't really make our relationship the most peaceful part of our lives.
Mm. Are you familiar at all with David Hawkins' scale of consciousness?
Hmm.
Okay.
Yes.
So as you were talking, it was just like lighting up in my awareness where courage is the level at which we shift. We shift from the, more victim mentality, anger, sadness, grief, shame, fear, those the
Those
things that are
are
lower on the scale, right? On the bottom of the triangle. And courage is where it flips up into, peace is pretty high up on the vibrational scale, and we can't get there without making that flip, doing the thing that feels courageous, that you're having to step through a little bit of, resistance, um, to create that peaceful
well,
relationship.
yeah, I think that's so well said. And I think also not always demonizing some of those lower vibration emotions, because I think no emotion is good or bad. I think
Mhm.
it's information. So another favorite kind of mantra of mine is do it scared. Fear is a perfectly normal emotion, especially when you're about to make change. And you can't have courage without fear. So I think the presence of that fear is not necessarily a negative, but it's a compass. When you're feeling fear, is that something to lean into? Is that an area to examine, just as the trigger can be the opportunity and the gateway to something better?
Oh, yeah, that's so good. And that feeling, can't remember where else I saw that recently, but yeah, courage isn't anything if it wasn't a little bit scary to step through, right? Like that, then courage doesn't exist. Like then
Yes.
you're just doing something you're okay with.
Yeah.
Um,
Then you just have naive. If you're just running directly towards the thing that scares you, that's
right.
not courage. It's if the fear is present, to your point.
Yeah, yes, that literally is stepping through the portal. I can think of very important conversations that I've had with lots of people, with my husband, with my kids, with my parents, with all kinds of people, where to have the conversation felt really scary. And it also was needed and necessary, right? Like I knew that this was the right thing to do, but stepping into and through the conversation, that took a lot of courage. And it felt like, for me, it'll feel like sometimes it will literally feel like fire in my chest, and like stepping through fire. The resistance is like a literal firewall of energetic firewall to move through. Is it going to be okay on the other side? I don't know, but we're going to have to go.
Definitely. And to make it actionable for anybody listening as well, I think it's so valuable when you're feeling really afraid, not to pretend that you're not feeling afraid, to actually even tell your partner, I'm really scared to talk to you about this, or I'm feeling a lot of fear, because that instantly puts your partner in a more empathetic, compassionate place. Oh no, they're feeling fearful. What can I do to create some safety? Right. And I think it disarms people a lot too and softens the conversation because if you come into it with, here are the things I want or need, versus, hey, I've been afraid to ask for some of these things, but I really want to co-create X. And so having that frame of sharing first, having that vulnerability of, hey, I'm feeling kind of scared right now, can be really helpful.
Oh my gosh, that is a perfect tip to like land on, I think. Because it wraps up back to communicate. We're not trying to read minds here. You don't need to be a mind reader. Your partner doesn't need to be a mind reader. We have to open up. We have to communicate about what we're thinking and feeling. And sharing vulnerably does mean, hey, I have something that I've been afraid to share and why? Because I'm worried about how you might react, right? Just name it, let it be. And I love how you positioned that of your partner. It gives your partner the chance to listen, like to stop and listen and be present with you. So
Yeah.
there's a lot of we could go more on that. I love it. But I want to make sure you have enough time to tell people, where they can find you, what you have coming up soon. How can people connect with you if they're hearing this and like, yes, that's exactly what I've been looking for, needing. Relationship has been on my radar, in the last year as well. Where can people get a hold of you?
So people can find me at my website or my Instagram handle, which is the same, Melissa Nanavati. I have a complicated last name to spell, so it's Nanavati. And there on my website, always feel free to just send me a direct message if you're dealing with this, if you are seeking some specific insight around an issue that you're looking to get help on, reaching out there. I also have an email list where I'm sharing tips weekly. I have lots of free guides and some paid kind of master classes coming up as well. But the biggest thing for me is also just sharing the information freely. You can find me on Instagram as well, on social media via the website. And the other thing that I have brewing that is a ways out still, but I'm working on a book right now specifically for high performers. And all of that information, anybody who gets on my email list will be able to have access to that. But my goal is really just to give actionable insights every week of frameworks, things that I'm utilizing in my own marriage, information that I'm learning through working with clients. So if you'd like to reach out, that's the place to find me. And I'm just always here as a resource for people navigating this because I believe that our relationship can be the most fulfilling, supportive part of our lives.
Mm. Oh, I wish we had another hour. And we might just need to do another hour at some point because yeah, I feel like we didn't even get to dig into the like relationship is like the fodder for growth. Like that's where we grow. We didn't even get to touch on that very much.
And
So
I will leave folks with this the idea, though, is that relationship, like anything else, is a set of skills and behaviors. And
mm,
if you can learn those skills and behaviors, no matter where you are in your relationship right now, no matter if you've been fighting, if you've been going through a lot, there's always the opportunity to pattern interrupt and to develop the skills in this area, like anything else.
so beautiful. Thank you so much for being here, Melissa. I've loved this conversation. And yeah, I think again, relationship work is some of the most potent, powerful, impactful work we can do in general in our lives. Learning how to be more of ourselves in relationship and let others be their full selves as well. And how do we love all of each other?
Absolutely. Thank you so much. This has been such a wonderful conversation, and I do hope we connect again more in the future.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you.
Thank you so much.
That's it for this episode. Thanks for listening and be sure to like and subscribe. And again, if anything resonated with you from this episode, I would love to hear from you. Email me at Hannah, HANNAH, at expansiveceo.com and tell me about it. And if you're ready for your greatest expansion, you can find ways to work with me at expansiveceo.com and at x2wealthplanning.com. That's X, the numeral 2, wealthplanning.com. So until next time, remember that there is enough, you are enough, and your birthright in this lifetime is to be expansive.